Well, hello and welcome into the Beyond the Youth Room podcast. My name is Ryne and this is Keith. And today we're going to be talking about how to set up your ministry for an impactful new school year. And so we know that school is getting ready to start around the country. And so we wanted to take some time today to walk through some things that should be on your radar to make sure that you start the new year off well in your student ministry. So stay tuned for today's episode. Now, Keith,
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
I was going to say, this is not your first new school year.
What are you saying?
Ministry.
Are you saying I'm old?
How many years?
Oh my goodness, 20, probably 20 school years that I've been a part of in youth ministry.
So you've seen a lot of these.
But yeah, 16 here at this church.
Okay.
Something like that. So
this is year 6 for me. And
oh, you're so old.
I know.
So old.
It's hard to believe it's been that. But I think one of the things that
I feel like in youth pastor years, though, like it should be like dog years where it's like 7 times the amount of
I feel that way.
Yeah,
We just came off camp, so I feel that way.
Yes.
But yeah, I think summer is a hard time for student ministry. I know we've talked in the past about should youth ministries take the summer off. We're both very passionate about the gospel goes forward no matter what. And so while things might look a little bit differently.
Yeah, we had a different programming. We actually tried some new things, which I just got some feedback from some leaders we probably won't do again. So so we're always learning.
It's a time to try some things.
But at the same time, we're almost ready for a new school year.
Yep.
We still have a little bit of camp season left on our church as we're recording this episode. But if you're listening to this, you might be at the tail end or maybe even finished with summer activities and getting geared up for school year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we wanted to create this episode, was to help people better prepare for an impactful new school year. So how to make some decisions, how to plan out so that you're not just going off the fly. Yeah, you're just not winging it.
Yeah, and as we prepare for the school year, sometimes that's hard because you don't feel like you have enough bandwidth to really, you just recovered from the past school year. So you're like, how do you jump into the new one? And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what are some simple ways you can set up yourself for success for the coming school year. And we're going to do that by 3 main categories, looking at where you are, where you could be, and the how. How are you going to get there?
Yep.
And so I think the one thing we need to realize when we're getting ready to launch into another school year is your group might not be the same that you started last school year with. And sometimes there's kind of a tendency in youth ministry when numbers are similar to think, oh, we have the same kids because we have the same numbers. And the reality is when I look over our year over year, I'm like, man, we got like a completely brand new group.
There's a different DNA, different makeup of our student population.
And hopefully we're retaining students, which we are. But as you continue to grow, even just adding 10 new kids where they are spiritually can change the whole dynamic of a group. And that's something we've seen. So I think the first thing is realizing where you are. So what are some ways that you have found or you would recommend to kind of gauge where our group is as we head into school year?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ones that we do that, so we during camp season, we do one-on-ones, which we've talked about in a previous episode of during our camp, our leaders meet with each student that we take to camp on a one-on-one conversation where they evaluate them spiritually just to kind of see where they are with the Lord. And we have the leaders then fill out a sheet of paper at the end that kind of helps us identify where each student is, in the 4-chair discipleship model. And so we define that. Yes, even if you have leaders that aren't quite familiar with the terminology yet, we just make it really simple to explain, which category.
It might be helpful for you to walk through what the 4-chair discipleship is.
Yeah, so chair 1, non-believer, so someone that hasn't placed their faith in Christ, whether they're even at church or not. Like, they might even have a church background, but they're not following Christ. Chair 2, someone that's a believer, but for whatever reason, maybe it's because of time, or maybe it's just because of lack of desire. They haven't really grown a lot in their faith yet, so they're just kind of Christian by name only, maybe just kind of nominally a follower of Christ. And then you have chair 3, which is worker. That's someone who is actively maybe serving and trying to invite friends to to church or invite them into a relationship with Christ, but they're not quite at the chair 4, which is disciple maker, which they're actively sharing the gospel. They're leading other people to the Lord. They might even have, quote, spiritual children or grandchildren, where they've seen several generations of people making disciples in their life, and people depend on them spiritually for shepherding or for guidance in their own walk with the Lord. So within that, we have our leaders evaluate where our students are, just based on conversation, the best they can. So it's not like they can have a magnifying glass into their heart, like the Lord still knows their heart, but just based on conversation, how they answer some of the questions that we provide. It really helps them to kind of evaluate where the students are during camp season. And then from there, we actually poll the students as well to self-evaluate, to answer some questions that will help them to determine which chair they're in. And we communicate the chairs, regularly to where it's, it's hopefully good, known terminology in our ministry so that people can kind of tell where they are and not just see our ministry as a menu where they can just pick and choose different things, but to see it as a roadmap where it's like, hey, we're trying to, advance chairs in our student population. And so those two things, helping our leaders to know our students well enough to where they can evaluate their own students that they're caring for and trusted with. And then the students' response. So through student surveys where we poll them, hopefully we haven't been as good about it this past year, but hopefully every quarter, if not like at least twice a year, where you can kind of get a pulse on, where your students are identifying themselves based on how they're answering the questions. And you can get the surveys from where?
So the 4-chair model comes from Dan Spader in his book, 4-Chair Discipling. And so they have a ministry called Like Jesus. So even if you want to go full bore in, they have an app where you can use, we use the app personally, and then I print out the surveys and then I just plug them into the app so that way I'm still paying them for their work.
Old, like printing out stuff. Oh my goodness.
For their worth, we're still paying them, but I'm able to physically just hand them out at youth group and say, all right, we're all going to do it right now and get that back. But they also have some really cool tools, so they're a great organization. But if you haven't read 4-Chair Discipling by Dan Spader, highly recommend it.
Yep. So that's where you can identify where you are. And I've known this from many years of experience doing this, where I've been wrong. Like I've been really wrong about like where I thought students were.
Yep.
And then I'm like, oh my goodness, you don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you don't believe Jesus is the only way to heaven. You don't believe that somebody
you'd be
doesn't
shocked
believe
at how some of these students are answering the question, even if they've been churched or, they've said in all your sermons.
Been baptized.
Yeah. And so just things like that, it just helps you to kind of identify some gaps in that. So we say all that because sometimes our direction of what we teach can matter on where our students are. So for instance, there was one year where we did a poll and we had, I think it was like 56% of our students were in chair 2. And then we had like, I think it was like 1%, or like it was just like one kid that was in chair 1. And so I was like, okay, this is really revealing of where our students are. So like one, we have a lot of just complacent Christians, and that's kind of even revealed in the lack of chair 1 students as well. Like absolutely. That we don't have any non-believers attending our gatherings. And so what I did was I really focused messages and sermon series on equipping those chair 2 students to activate them into serving and to sharing the gospel with other people. And so that helped. And so we're even just in a quarter, like in a 3-month period of time, we're able to see I think it was like a 17% jump from chair 2 to chair 3. And once we reevaluated, it was like the same students, so it was the same school year. So it wasn't like we waited for the seniors to graduate and then all the new 6th graders were, no, it was really helpful to kind of see where our students were. And I probably wouldn't, and I actually do this before I figure out the results of the surveys. I guess where our students are, not like individually, but I'm saying like, I guess like, okay, I think we're gonna have this percentage of this and this percentage of this. And then I see the results and I'm never right. Like no. 100%, like, I mean, I might be similar, but it's never completely accurate.
I'm looking at our past 2 years of our 4-chair surveys. I think I told you the first time, I thought we had a pretty spiritually strong youth group, and we took the survey and 54% scored in chair 1. And I was like, huh?
The last time we did it, there was a lot more than chair 1 than I expected.
Yeah. Now we're at, last time we took it, we had 14% in chair 1 and we had 20% in chair 4, which that's was like
pretty high.
We had 0% the first time we took it 2 years ago.
So they say to aim for about 10% in chair 4.
10% of true believers.
Is make disciples. And so within that, all that to say, we need to figure out where you are.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure out where you are as a ministry to know how to best serve your students in this upcoming school year.
Yeah.
And so based on that, like, it's just guessing if you're not really basing on any kind of data.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to collect data so that it's more objective. It's not just like, and of course, I mean, and people, and it's funny because I have conversations that are like, well, like you shouldn't be measuring anything, because that's up to the Lord. It's like, I know that it's up to the Lord. Mm-hmm. Like, I know, like, we want to be careful not to just measure this as the only marker. It's like, we still want to be faithful. We want to, but your student gets better at the mile because they record the mile in gym class.
Yeah.
And so why don't we approach ministry like that? Like, we're not going to be legalistic about it. It's not like how we earn our salvation.
Correct.
It's not how we, but we want to
we don't wear name tags
stewards.
that say what chair we're in.
Yeah. It's not like this
we don't
thing
do
where we
small groups by chair.
Yeah. So when it comes to just any kind of metrics of success, we just want to be faithful to caring for the people that we have. And it's the same thing like with, it's like we put people in age classes in children's ministry.
Yeah.
It's like that's based on maturity. Like it's based, so it's like, why not do that spiritually? Like with, maturity, like just identify the maturity level, spiritual maturity of our students so that we can better care for them. And because we don't want to just be, missing the mark when it comes to how we're teaching and how we're preaching and shepherding our students. So the next one is after you determine where you are, then you can kind of focus on where you could be. And this is where we recommend as you start off a school year, try to set a bold vision for that school year. And so for the school year, we say that like, because sometimes you have like a bolder vision that's more of like a 5-year goal. And maybe you break that into 5 different sections and you say this school year, we're going to do, just cover a fifth of the 5-year goal or whatever. Sometimes you just need to have a bold vision for that school year and just, to kind of hit the next mark. And dream big for that. Like, in other words, like so a bold vision, if you guys haven't seen our previous episodes where we've covered this, a bold vision is something that is beyond yourself to accomplish. In other words, if this happened, you would have to give credit to the Lord. Like you couldn't be like, well, we kind of were responsible for that. So don't aim so low where it's like, we're going to hit this already, so we might as well just make this a goal. No, it's like we want to make sure. And then what can be included with a bold vision? So like, what are some examples? Are we talking about like, how many pieces of bacon we can eat at camp next year? Like what is a bold vision? What are some good things to actually put in a bold vision? Like what is an example?
Yeah. One of the big things that we say is gospel conversations. How many gospel conversations are we having in a year? We want to be careful about this one, but we have a salvations goal, but we're clear to say this is what we're praying for. We don't control salvation. We don't save anybody, but our thought process is the more seeds we sow, the more that we will reap a harvest. And so those gospel conversations, interestingly enough, again, you cannot put a formula on God. I want to be so clear, but I don't know if it's similar in your experience, but to us, it's pretty much always been for every 10 gospel conversations we have, there's normally one person who accepts Christ. And so, again, it's not well, if we do this, we'll get this, because that's all up to God. And there's many examples of prophets who had thousands of gospel conversations and nobody come to Christ. So we want to be mindful of that. But just this urgency of the more we share the gospel, the more people are going to accept it. And then we had a goal. We didn't want to put a number on how many students we had because we didn't want it to be like you're the 100th student, so you get a free. But we had a goal of filling the room. It's like, hey, next year, we don't want to be able to just all meet together in this room again. We want to outgrow this room to where we're expanding what we're doing. So those are some good ones. Baptism, because then you're progressing students through. It's like, hey, we want a goal to have 30 kids baptized this year. Well, then you're going to emphasize baptism, the importance of baptism. You're going to give you an opportunity to speak more into kids. So anything that can be measured. I mean, you got your SMART goals, but really, is this moving the kingdom forward? Yeah. It's not, hey, let's have a goal of having 200 kids here, so that way we can say we had 200 kids. It's no, what do those 200 kids represent?
Yep, definitely. And so even with our kind of local, like our area bold vision, so there's about 200,000 teenagers in our area, and this is a collective effort between all of our youth ministry network, folks like in our region. So it's not just like one of our churches that is doing this, but we want in the next 5 years to see all 200,000 of those teenagers hear the gospel from a friend. And so how can we take a slice of that pie? So that's even like a slice of our pie just in our area of Northern Virginia. But when it comes to even our own youth ministry, bold vision, like what are we going to stand and say, hey, we want to take a portion of that and really share the gospel with, this many people or have this many gospel conversations. And so with that, ours, as we're looking towards the future, one of the things that I'm challenging my students on is just dreaming big for the Lord. Like we're and I think we come up with excuses why we can't do certain things. Like, in other words, I just threw out and this was just like an arbitrary, so we have about 50 students that are regularly come into our youth ministry at our location here. And so I said, why don't we have 500 students? And they're like, well, we couldn't all fit in the church. Like our auditorium can hold actually 500 people downstairs. So it's like, okay, they can't even fit in the parking lot. Like, yeah, actually we can fit in the parking lot.
And if we have to go find a bigger building, great.
Yeah. And it's like, well, they wouldn't be able to get here. It's like, we have 2 empty vans out back that we never use. Like, well, and so just like just helping them to see that bold vision, what it could be. And so, so I'm walking through the process. We haven't, determined what our actual bold vision for the school year is, but I think it might be something similar to that, to where we say like, hey, what would it look like for us to have 500 students and not just like fill a room? So there'd be kind of sub goals with that to say, hey, what would it look like for us to have, 500 teenagers that we're impacting weekly and 25% of them be new believers like that came to Christ through our ministry.
Yeah.
And so anyways, so that's not impossible. Like we see the Lord can do that. Like, and so if students like have this, like, oh, wow. And we talked about this before about how a bold vision sets a new bar. Like it sets like a new, like not just ceiling, but like a floor to what you think is possible.
Yeah.
And we talked about this when we were at the Gospel Advancing Summit, where, we as a ministry, we were really working hard and praying to 10x our impact with how many student leaders we trained for Edge Club. And so we 105 in 2023, and in 2024 we wanted to 10x that almost to 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, I don't know if we'll be able to hit that like by December 31st of 2024, and we hit it by June of 2024. So in the first 6 months we hit 1,000 students trained.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we would have never trained 1,000 if we had aimed for 200.
Nope.
Or doubling our impact. And then when we were out, in the Gospel Advancing Summit, and we were talking to other leaders that are doing similar things around the country, and they just kind of casually mentioned, like, yeah, we're going to be training 250,000 teenagers this summer, not just a year, like just in one state. And I'm like, I thought 1,000 was a lot. And so anyway, so just with that, like thinking big, like dreaming big for the Lord, like not just to like puff up our own pride. Like like I'm okay if a student that comes to Christ through our ministry never even knows my name. Yeah. Like I would be delighted actually.
Did I tell you? I had that happen the other day. I had a girl, she trusted Christ, and she came up afterwards to share with me, and she was like, "What's your name, by the way?" I was like, "This is awesome. This is so cool."
Yeah. And I mean, that's where we want to be. Like we just want to, have the Lord work through us and move out of the way. Like we don't want to, and so so hear us when we say this. This is not about our own pride, or it's not about like, seeing what we can do. Like, no, like we want to see the Lord because we know he can do it, and we want to see students impacted. Yeah. And I think that's the grassroots way that the Lord is really using youth ministry right now is shifting from a come and see mentality to really a go and tell mentality, like where we're equipping students to where, the friends that come to Christ, they don't need to bring them to their youth pastor to come, to learn the gospel. It's like, no, you share the gospel with them. Like you're going to be more impactful as a friend sharing it with them. And so, so to set that bold vision. So not only determine where you are by evaluating, maybe with some hard data that you collect from your ministry. So do some surveys, ask your leaders where students are individually, but where you could be setting that bold vision for the school year. And so maybe that looks like, having a certain amount of gospel conversation, which is, the activity that leads to, more gospel proclamation. And then, even though, we recommend an outcome goal, like, so in other words, what will that translate to? So if we have this many gospel conversations, what will that translate to? So we would love to hear, that, 500 students heard the gospel from a friend. Mm-hmm. Like that's if we have this many gospel conversation, then hopefully that's 500 different people. So it's not like 500 conversations with the same person. Yeah. It's like, so try to be outcome focused. And then of course, like try to measure it to where you can actually tell if you hit it or not. So bold vision. And then the last thing is how you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to just say like, this is what we're going to do, and it's on the website, or this is what we say, but we don't have any plan or system or anything in place to actually do this. And we were talking about this when it comes to, the impact that we're trying to have for this upcoming school year with Edge Club, who we serve with and sponsors this podcast, is we want to have a goal, but then also develop a plan. Mm-hmm. So like, in other words, what is the plan to actually help get that goal? And then what systems do we need to put into place that will help us to achieve that plan that leads to that goal? Yeah. And then sometimes even the question is, what kind of person do I need to become in order for that goal to happen? Yeah. And that's a challenging thing because it's like, question. That there has to be like some type of leadership growth or like a healthy, turning away from, habits or sins or anything like that would hinder the growth. And so when it comes to even just evaluating ourselves, it's like, okay, what kind of person do I need to become so it's ensured? I need to become a delegator. Mm-hmm. I need to become like whatever the opposite of a procrastinator is. What is that?
I don't know. Somebody who does things on time.
Procrastinator? No. Yeah, what would be you can't look it up on the thesaurus because that would just be common. Anyways, whatever the opposite of a procrastinator is.
Expedite.
An expediter. Sounds like
Whatever.
a UPS driver or
There you
something.
go.
All right, so you need to become the UPS driver of youth ministry,
There you go.
where you just need to get it there on time.
I worked
So anyways,
UPS in a
yeah.
past
So,
life.
so when it comes to even just, evaluating your own
Yeah.
habits, your own, like, I need to be more of a man of prayer in order for this
Mm-hmm.
to happen. I need to memorize more scripture for us, for this to be a thing. Like, I need
Mm-hmm.
to, count on God's promises for my own. Like, I need to, something that we're, that I was sharing with you, like, I'm working on. It's like, man, I need to be healthier in order to have more energy. And so, like, I'm in the process. My wife and I are like trying to eat healthier and exercise more so that we can be more effective in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So what type of person do you need to become to get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, of course, don't do it by yourself. Like, we've talked about this, about the kidney test. Like, if everything depends on you and you have a kidney stone and your ministry can't function, it's too dependent on you.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you're the leader of the ministry, and yes, you can take responsibilities, and and you can actually have responsibility. Like, so in other words, don't delegate anything out where you're just like, they don't need me anymore. Like, I mean, yeah, you can do that, but I'm just saying, what kind of people do you need to surround yourself with, and what kind of people do you need to recruit? So maybe it requires, adult leader recruitment or training. We do a thing, and I was mentioning this to you before about, we've really tried to do not like a retreat in the sense of like, we're going to take our leaders on a camp or like an overnight retreat, but we do it like it's a Friday night and a good portion of Saturday, where we do, like worship, like, and some teaching. It's almost just like a spiritual retreat for them, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't stay overnight. We do, like, after we have like the main session on Friday night, we'll do like a board game, activity. We're just kind of hang out. And I think what I've found is our adult leaders, they don't get to hang out a lot by themselves as adults,
Mm-hmm.
with each other, even though they're serving alongside of each other. So what happens is, during our youth ministry programming, they're kind of congregating in the corner talking, and we have to break that, up. And it's like, no, go talk to the students. They're here, And so we're providing that outlet for them to just kind of talk as adults, and because hopefully they enjoy each other's company, and they like each other. So to have that kind of outlet for them. So Friday night we do like worship, and then like kind of a heartfelt message, not just practical teaching on like how to do a small group better, or just how to use, or the child safety policy or whatever. Like, we really try to make sure that they're cared for spiritually. So it's almost like a spiritual retreat for them. We spend some time in prayer. We encourage them to do devotions and teach them a new aspect of theology or whatever it is. And then Saturday is just different things. Like, we've even covered, like, we've taught through the whole Bible in like one session, like just an overview of the Bible, and provided them with some resources on like just how the Bible fits together. So some of them, like, you just don't assume that they are Bible theologians or that they've been to Bible college. Like, some of them, especially if you're like near like a Christian Bible college, you might have a lot of leaders that are actually Bible college trained or seminary trained. But yeah, don't assume that that they're at the depth spiritually that you need them to be to really see the Lord work in their hearts too. So yeah, so we do adult leader training and of course recruitment and stuff to shore up everything for the school year. And then we have student leader training and recruitment, which, tell me about what you're doing. Like, you started this at camp as like an action step. Tell us what you did so I can steal some ideas.
So in the past, we don't have a student leadership team in the sense that these are student leaders. We have an all call. Anybody who wants to be a part of it can be a part of it. But we call it Task Force 1016, where we train students to, share the gospel with those.
I feel like
them.
There's a verse connected to that.
Matthew 10:16, behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. And so we want them to be trained to understand the world they're going into and be prepared to do just that. But this year we wanted to open the doors wider, because last year was kind of like you have to make so many meetings and all that. And I was like, you know what? Like, if a kid is a leader on their team, then they might not be able to be at youth group as much. So how do we train that student to gospelize their world? And so this year we're still calling it Task Force 1016, but the way we're outwardly pitching it to our students is, hey, okay, this is what God's done in your life. This is what he wants to do in the lives of others. If you want to play a large role in that, if you want to lead a gospel movement at your school, or on your football team, or in your community, or at your workplace, or wherever, we're going to train you how to do that. And then we're going to act as a support group throughout the school year to meet together to say, hey, what's working well for you guys? Hey, we should do that. Hey, what are you struggling with? Hey, guys, what are some ideas for they can do that? And so instead of just being, instead of just being like, okay, this is how you do it, it's like, okay, you actually went and did it. How'd it go? What can we improve? What can we do better? So, for instance, it might be, I want to share the gospel with every teacher in my school. Well, that might sound impossible because some of our, schools, they've got over 200 teachers. well, what if you wrote a letter to every single teacher and just handed one a day, and it shared the gospel in it, and you invited them to your local church? It's like at the end of the school year, if you did that every day, you would have invited, 180, teachers to church, and it shared the gospel with 180 of them, and you made that personal because you went and handed it to them.
Yeah.
It's like
huge.
it's when you break it down like that, it's like, well, I could write letters. Like I might not be great at preaching or sharing the gospel. It's like, okay, well, what if you're on a football team? Well, how many guys are on your football team? Well, we got 50. It's like, well, what would it look like for you to try and share the gospel with every single player on your football team?
Yeah.
Oh, well, how do we do that? So just kind of reverse engineering. And so how do we have, X amount of gospel conversations? Well, if we train X amount of kids and their bold vision, it's like, boom, there you go. So that's one of the things that we're calling students to this year.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. So so even student leadership, which I've mentioned in a past episode, like we have our middle school community is pretty much led by high school student leaders, that invest in the younger crowd. And so, but even with that though, we're trying to roll out a little bit more systematized way of investing in those high school leaders. So right now it's just kind of, they're committed and they're coming, but we need to be more intentional about developing them. And so we're planning on rolling some things out, this fall for them. Yeah. So how you're going to get there? What is the plan? What are the systems you have to have in place to maximize your time? And just kind of reverse engineering that bold vision. Yeah. So if you know that you want to, have your students, share the gospel 500 times, or to share it with 500 different people, and you have a group of say 50 students, how many times do they have to share if all 50
10.
do? Yeah. So 10 gospel conversations for the whole school year. That's more than doable, by the way. Yeah. I would even say that might be aiming low when it comes to challenging your students. And some of them won't do it. Some of them will do more. And so, the average of 10 gospel conversation over 9 months, that's a little bit more than one a month.
Yep.
So I would say even ones that we've trained, we've seen at least one a week.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can reverse engineer that. How do you come up with a bold vision that's going to be challenging and keep people on track that are going to get excited about? Is kind of reverse engineering that, how many students you have times, one gospel conversation per week, which is doable. Some of them will do more than that actually for challenging them too. And then what do you need to do to spend time equipping students to do that? So you might even say hey, we're going to have gospel conversations, but they're like, how do I do that? And so even just how you're going to get there is, it can mean okay, we're going to have training on this. We're going to bring it up during our program time where we're going to have a role playing aspect of our youth ministry where we're sharing the gospel and we're knowing how to do that. We're overcoming challenges, in a safe environment where we can role play and people can say weird things and it's okay because this is just practice.
Don't ever say that.
Yeah. And, it's please don't say that to a real person. But we do that where we do AAA Cafe and we, have students kind of role play. Even my older son who's in our middle school ministry now, he was one of the volunteers and I was like, wow, I'm really proud of you. But all he wanted to do was come up and be the person that was trying to get the gospel shared to them, and he just made up this crazy religion that didn't make any sense. And I was like, I'm kind of proud that you volunteered, but at the same time, yeah, I know you're just trying to be silly. And I forget what he said, something about how you get to heaven. It was some kind of weird monster or something like that he believed in saved us, or I don't know. So anyway, so be cautious with that. But when it comes to the idea of how you're going to get there, make sure you're intentional about reverse engineering that bold vision. Evaluating where your students are, and then of course plan out your calendar. That's how you can focus. So I would come up with where your students are first, then setting that bold vision, reverse engineering the calendar to put stuff in the calendar to help you get to those milestones and those goals to break it down. Yep. Okay, let's head into some rapid fire questions. Do you have a bold vision for this upcoming year? If so, what is it?
Yeah, so I've changed ours over the course of this podcast.
You haven't told me this yet.
Well,
if you do have one.
So ours this past year is 500 gospel conversations and 50 salvations. Okay. I was going to do 1,000.
You overshot that, you overachiever.
Yeah, right. And that's part of it. I think we're going to end up around 700 gospel conversations. And so I was like, 1,000 would be double. And now through our conversations, I'm like, if one kid writes a letter to every teacher, I'm like, there is 180.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I think we're going to do 2,000 gospel conversations this year. And we'll be praying for 100 salvations from those 2,000 gospel conversations. Because obviously, the more, we're big on relational evangelism. So writing letters isn't quite the conversation that we want to have, but just getting creative in how we do that. But I even think of Edge Club, the last year at one of our middle school locations, we had 56 kids. And it's what if we just invited that many every time? It's literally, if we were to meet, 8 times like that, that'd be 400 gospel conversations if 50 kids came. So it's again, when you reverse engineer it like that, it becomes
Yep.
really doable. So I think ours is
Very
going to
doable.
be 2,000 gospel conversations, 100 salvations, and then we're going to have a goal of growing so large we have to split programming to where it's like, hey,
Like middle school, high school.
yep, we're
Yeah.
gonna double it. Yep,
Or you can do guys and girls.
we'll do middle school, high school. Yeah.
I don't know if any. I mean, maybe some youth ministries. Actually, when we were looking at a camp recently, the requirements was that all the kids that swam had to wear like clothes.
Oh,
they couldn't wear.
I didn't think that was.
They had to wear clothes over their bathing suits.
I thought it was going to be the camp
and only King James only preaching.
Well, I mean, obviously
that was the requirement for a church to come to the camp.
But I think the idea of having a guys camp and a girls camp, you could sell me on that. That'd be better than middle school, high school camp, doing a guy camp and a girl camp.
That would be pretty interesting. I'm trying to imagine, because we're actually going to be doing a guys' night and girls' night for our youth ministry.
Camp
will be a summer event.
You're talking about you don't have, like, that would take away so many dynamics.
Yeah.
It'd be, yeah.
I wonder if some people wouldn't come because of that. You think so?
Well,
I think the middle school, they'd be like, yes.
This is awesome.
Thank you.
And you can plan all your activities around it. All right. It's done. I'm doing it.
Okay.
Yep. What about you guys? Do you guys
try it out? So Bold Vision, again, I'm meeting with some leaders and some student leaders to I want them to have some ownership in it. So I don't want to just be like, this is what we're doing. Like, I really want to help them, help us all formulate one together. But somewhere around that, like we want to have, 2,000-3,000 gospel conversations. I mean, we want to aim high for, I would like to challenge them to say, like, hey, what would it look like for us to have 500, like to 10x our ministry. And I've been like on this 10x kick, recently, where it's like, I mean, it helps you to decide things so much easier if that's your goal. Like if you're going to try to 10x some kind of growth.
Say yes or no to.
Yeah. I mean, it just helps you to think bigger, and I didn't even think we'd be able to hit 1,000 students trained, and we did in half the time that we did 100.
Yep.
It's like, what? So, but because like we had to say no to certain things, like I couldn't train all of those students personally. Like I did the 105, where we just rotated around, and I was like, this is actually easier, and we're making a larger impact. And so anyway, so I think if we thought like that, as a youth ministry, I think, having 500 students impacted weekly, again, like not just to fill a room, but like literally, like if we had a goal of I don't even know, 25% of 500, is that 175?
125.
125. Is that
25% of 500?
Yeah.
25% of 1,000 would be 250
divided
by 2.
Yeah, it's 125. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna say this. I'll say we're praying for 125 students to come to Christ this upcoming school year.
We might do 126.
I was thinking 127 actually. Then I reduced it down to 125.
All right.
No competition, seriously. But I mean, competition for the kingdom. Like we obviously want to see more kids come to Christ.
Yeah,
There's not a shortage of them.
Nope.
We're not such a high, such a high population.
If 125 kids came to Christ through your ministry and 125 came to Christ through our ministry, we would still have about 47,500 in this county. You still needed to hear it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just in our county. Not even, because we pull from 3 other counties too. So that's amazing. I mean, amazingly daunting.
Yep.
Task to see. Yeah. So let's get to it. Yeah. No competition between student ministries. All right. So we have another rapid fire question. New initiative that you're most looking forward to this year.
We're younger youth group, but we're now starting to give you an example, this past camp, we did a thing on the last night where all of our graduated seniors and rising seniors, they got to stay up past curfew, and we just kind of hung out with them, and we kind of just spoke into their lives, what we see doing. So let's say we had 1 graduating senior and we had 10 rising seniors. Wow. And so we're finally hitting that point where now we'll start to put really graduate, like, I'll miss individual kids, but we're now getting to a point where we're graduating out kids. So it's it's going to impact our ministry because we're really training up these kids.
It's huge.
And so I want to just do my best to make sure that they are getting plugged into the church beyond youth group. And so one of the things that we're going to do is our the director who oversees our young adults, he's going to come in once a month during youth group and actually take our rising seniors and our graduating seniors, and he's going to take them once a month and just spend some time with them talking about, okay, what does this look like next steps practically, biblically? How do you choose where to go to college? How do you know what to study, all these things, or how do you know if you should go to college? Spend some time talking with them to really kind of prepare them. So I'm excited because it kind of creates that, the relationship's already built when they graduate out, and I don't have to worry about hey, you need to get connected here. It's we've already done that. So when they graduate, so that's something I'm pretty excited about doing this year. What about y'all?
So the student leader intentionality. So we're really trying to formalize our student leadership program to where it's not just like hey, you're a student leader, but like to we have students that are like wanting to become student leaders. But what does that mean? Like, what does that entail? What commitment level is that? And just how we're investing in them, I'm really excited about. So yes, we're going to definitely up that challenge for them. So it's not just like, hey, you're a student leader if you say you're a student leader. Like, it's like we're really being intentional with expectations and accountability.
That's
and of course that relational. So yeah, trying to invest in more of our student leadership to develop them more.
That's cool.
Okay, so 1 minute questions.
Yep.
Am I going first? You went first last time, but I can go first if you want.
Okay.
I don't feel like I'm quite prepared for this one. I know the answer, but I don't even know if I'll watch. I'll say like I don't even need a minute, but then I'll probably not even be it in less than a minute.
I don't know. I mean, you can do it in one word, but
yeah. Okay, so the question that you're going to give me.
Yes, Keith. And this is we went to, for people to know, you're gonna have to restart your timer.
Yeah.
We went to Got Questions and we looked up the top 20 most asked questions.
Okay.
So Keith, did God create Satan?
Yes. Short answer is yes. So I think people they have a misconception about Satan that he's just the opposite of God, and it's not true. So Satan is not omnipresent. He's not he's not everywhere at the same time like God is. But yes, God has created everything that ever has been, is, or ever will be, which includes angels, which Satan was a fallen angel. So that's physical beings and spiritual beings. And so I would say, the short answer is yes, he created Satan. And then when it comes to, even just how we view Satan, we have to realize that he is under the submission of God. So he can't do anything outside of what God allows him to do. And for a season, he has dominion in this world, but he is still controlled by
But God did not create him to cause evil. He created him as an angel.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Yep. Thought that was important to add in there in that last couple seconds.
58 seconds right there.
There you go. Teamwork.
All right. So do you need the timer?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
So here's your question, Ryne.
Mm-hmm.
How old were Jesus' disciples?
Yeah, a lot of times we picture them as being kind of, adult men, which some of them definitely were, Peter definitely being one. But there's actually one passage that gives us a big clue, and that is Matthew 17, where it talks about paying the temple tax. And Jesus is talking to Peter, and he says, Matthew 17:27, however, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and yourself. And so the implication there is that Jesus and Peter paid the temple tax, but not the rest of the disciples. And in Jewish tradition, those over the age of 20 paid the temple tax. And so actually what we seem to believe is that since Peter paid the temple tax, he's the only one that we're ever told is married. Peter was likely older, similar to the age of Christ, but the rest of the disciples, we actually believe they were teenagers. And so, the reality.
So wait, you mean to tell me that Jesus chose teenagers to change the world?
First youth group, but likely they were probably between the ages of 13 and 20.
Wow.
So
amazing. In less than a minute as well.
There you go.
All right. Well, that concludes another episode of Beyond the Youth Room podcast. We are sponsored by Edge Club. And if you want to train your students on how to be student missionaries, we have a free student missionary training, which you can show to your students in your youth ministry. And that is found at edgeclub.org/training. And again, it's free to you to use, so you can just sign up and have access to that. And you can break it into different modules or just do it all at one session. But we cover gospel fluency, gospel urgency, gospel fluency, how to share the gospel strategy, how to actually start a campus club in their public school. And so if you would like to experience that training for your youth ministry, you can head over to edgeclub.org/training. And so thank you so much for tuning in today. The best compliment that you can give us is to share this with other people that might benefit from our content. And we hope to see you in the next episode.